Let's talk about something, well, something pretty much unthinkable. A civil war, but not state against state. We're talking about the very branches of the U.S. military, the ones designed to protect the nation, turning on each other. A war that pits America's most incredible technology against its own people, on its own soil. So let's break down how this absolutely devastating conflict could actually play out.
What really happens when the forces that command the skies and the seas turn their weapons on the forces that command the ground and the homeland? I mean, who would actually win a war where every single target is American and every casualty is a loss for the nation itself? This is so much more than a question of firepower. It's a question of what war even means.
So on one side, you've got the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force. This group has basically all of America's long-range toys, its stealth tech, and, unparalleled control over the entire world's oceans. Then, on the other side, you have the entire U.S. National Guard. That's a massive ground force, deeply woven into every single state, with direct control over the country's infrastructure, its resources, and its people. It's really that classic matchup, quality versus quantity, projection power versus just plain staying power. The source material we're digging into frames this whole thing with a really powerful analogy. It's like dropping a single modern M1 Abrams tank onto a medieval battlefield against 10,000 knights. The tank? That's the Navy and the Air Force. It's this technological monster that can strike with devastating force from miles away. And the knights? Well, that's the National Guard. They seem totally outmatched, but they have crushing numbers, they know the terrain perfectly, and they can simply wait. They can bleed the beast dry of fuel and ammo. Honestly, this analogy is the key to understanding everything that follows.
Alright, so here's our game plan for breaking down this massive conflict. We're going to start with the forces on each side, then jump into the opening blitz from the air and sea. After that, we'll see how the homeland strikes back, how the war grinds down into this brutal fight for resources, and finally, what winning could possibly even mean in a war that rips a nation apart.
Okay, let's really set the stage here. The second this fracture happens, the United States is no longer a single military power. Instead, it becomes two totally separate entities. Each one inherits a piece of the whole, and each one has a fatal weakness.
And this slide, man, it just lays out the core problem perfectly. The Skies and Seas team has the crown jewels, right? Aircraft carriers, stealth bombers, nuclear subs. They can hit any target anywhere. But the ground and homeland team has almost 500,000 soldiers, all of America's tanks, and this is the critical part, they control every domestic airfield, port, factory, and oil field. Their weakness? They're sitting ducks for air power. The Navy and Air Force's weakness? Their amazing machines are completely useless without fuel and complex supply lines, which are now deep inside enemy territory.
So if you're the air and sea forces, you're facing an enemy with just overwhelming numbers and logistical depth. You know you have one shot at this. You have to win fast. You simply can't afford a long war. So your opening move has to be a single, paralyzing blow that the Guard can never, ever recover from.
The whole objective of that first day is pure shock and awe. This isn't about destroying the Guard's army piece by piece. It's about shattering its ability to organize and fight back at all. It's a psychological attack just as a physical one. The thinking is, if you can throw the Guard into total chaos before its command structure even solidifies, the war could be over before it really begins. And the execution of this blitz would be absolutely methodical. First up, a massive cyber attack to blind the Guard's communication networks. Then, while everyone's confused, stealth bombers like the B-2 would strike leadership targets, cut the head off the snake. At the same time, naval forces would seize critical coastal bases to create footholds on the continent. And finally, they'd use their total air superiority to destroy the Guard's own limited air force while it's still on the ground. And make no mistake, the tool for this job is America's stealth fleet. With over 175 F-22s, F-35s, and B-2s, the Air Force and Navy can hit pretty much any target they want with near total impunity in those opening hours. To a fractured command system, it's like a scalpel that can cut out the heart of the Guard's leadership before the alarm bells even start ringing.
This quote from our source material just perfectly captures the whole mentality. It's not about attrition, it's about annihilating the will to even resist. The air and sea forces aren't just dropping bombs, they're trying to prove that resistance is absolutely futile by delivering a blow so fast and so devastating that the Guard just gives up.
But what if the Knights don't break? What if the National Guard actually survives that initial shock and awe? Well, this is where the conflict completely changes. Because if the Guard survives, its greatest weakness, the homeland itself, becomes its greatest strength.
You see, the Guard has the ultimate home field advantage, which in military terms is called interior lines.
The Navy and Air Force have to move all their stuff across huge oceans or hostile airspace, but the Guard? They can move troops and tanks from Ohio to Texas by rail in just a couple of days, using a secure internal network. This logistical advantage is, well, it's enormous. You really can't overstate it.
And this slide right here, this reveals the fatal flaw in the high-tech side's entire plan. They control the weapons, sure, but the Guard controls everything you need to use those weapons. We're talking oil and gas from Texas and the Gulf Coast, food from the entire Midwest breadbasket, the industrial power to build and repair vehicles in the Rust Belt, and of course, a nearly limitless pool of manpower. This just says it all, doesn't it? An F-35 is the most advanced fighter jet on Earth, but without jet fuel, it's a billion-dollar paperweight. An aircraft carrier is a floating city, but if you cut off its resupply, it becomes a prison for 5,000 sailors. And the Guard knows this. Their main target won't be the carriers or the jets. It'll be the tankers and the supply lines that feed those hungry beasts.
So, the Guard's strategy becomes asymmetric. They're not going to line up for a conventional battle. No way. They're going to disperse their forces to make them harder to hit. They'll use natural fortresses like the Rocky Mountains to hide their assets. They'll conduct raids on those coastal enclaves going after fuel depots. And they'll try to lure those fancy high-tech jets into dense cities where a pilot's tech advantage is dulled, and a single soldier with a shoulder-fired missile hiding in a skyscraper can become a giant killer. They're just going to trade space for time.
So, once that initial shock and awe campaign fails to get a quick win, the war completely transforms. It's not a swift, surgical conflict anymore. It becomes a slow, grinding war of attrition, a contest of who can keep their war machine running the longest.
A timeline of this ugly war would look something like this. In the first month, a clear divide forms. The Navy and Air Force control pockets on the coasts, while the Guard solidifies its iron grip on the resource-rich heartland. By month 6, the logistical bite really begins. The high-tech force starts running low on precision missiles and, most importantly, fuel. Tankers suddenly become the most valuable targets in the war. By the end of year 1, it's a stalemate, a war of production. Can the Guard arm soldiers faster than the skies can bomb their factories? From here on out, it's just a race to see which side's critical resource runs out first.
This slide perfectly captures the war's new central struggle. It's a duel of depletion. For the skies and seas, it's all about sustaining a constant flow of fuel and incredibly complex munitions. For the ground and homeland, it's about making spare parts for thousands of vehicles. And, just as important, maintaining morale for a fight on their own soil. Both sides are fighting a countdown clock just as much as they're fighting each other.
And if you need one visual to understand why a long war favors the Guard, this is it. They control roughly 90% of the nation's domestic oil and refining capacity. Yeah, the Navy and Air Force can try to import fuel, but their tankers will be hunted relentlessly. In modern warfare, fuel is blood, and the heartland controls the supply.
Which brings us to the inevitable, really grim conclusion. After so much destruction, what does victory even look like? Who could possibly claim to have won a war for America's soul that was fought with American lives on American land?
The most probable outcome is just a bitter stalemate. The air and sea forces can't conquer the heartland, and the Guard can't push them back into the sea. The front lines harden, and the United States effectively ceases to exist. It gets replaced by two hostile, militarized nations. In this scenario, the real casualty is the very idea of America itself. Now, it's possible the Knights do eventually win. The high-tech tank runs out of fuel and ammo, and its war machine just grinds to a halt. The Guard would control what's left, but it would be a Pyrrhic victory. The country's infrastructure would be in absolute ruins from years of aerial bombardment, and the population would be exhausted and deeply traumatized.
On the flip side, the air and sea forces might achieve a tactical victory by cutting off the Guard's leadership. But they can't occupy a continent. They would win the battles but lose the peace, facing a permanent, simmering insurgency fought by a population that sees them as occupiers. It's a hollow victory that guarantees generations of more conflict. In the end, the central lesson here is pretty clear. In a conflict where every side is American, victory is just an illusion. The tank might destroy the Knights, or the Knights might starve the tank, but the kingdom is burned to the ground either way. And it forces us to ask one last, haunting question. In a war for a nation's soul, what could possibly be left to win?